What if your country's entire savings, its gold reserves, painstakingly gathered over decades, could be frozen overnight by a foreign power? This isn't some dystopian fantasy. This is the very real story of Venezuela's 31 tons of gold, and it throws the curtain back on a powerful new weapon in the 21st century arsenal: the weaponization of global finance. For Venezuela, this has been a terrifying reality for years, a preview of a new era of financial warfare, where the rules of global power are being rewritten right before our eyes. The struggle over this gold is more than just a fight over assets. It's a warning sign that the very foundations of the global economic system are becoming a battlefield. To get how a nation's treasure can end up in a legal black hole, you first have to understand why it was sitting in a London vault to begin with. For centuries, central banks have parked some of their gold reserves abroad, mostly in financial hubs like London and New York. The Bank of England, for example, holds around 400,000 gold bars for governments all over the world. It's the second biggest gold custodian on the planet, right after the New York Federal Reserve. There are good, practical reasons for this. It's way easier to trade gold or use it as collateral for international loans if it's already in a major financial center. It saves the massive cost and security headache of physically shipping tons of metal across the globe. This entire system is built on an old-world idea: trust. The belief that these financial guardians are neutral parties, just holding assets, not playing politics. But what happens when that trust gets broken? For the last 80 years, this whole system has been built around one thing: the US dollar. The dollar is the world's main reserve currency. That means most international trade, from oil to coffee, is priced and paid for in dollars. This gives the United States an incredible, almost unmatched level of power. And how do you move all those dollars? You use a system called SWIFT. Think of it as the financial world's private messaging app. It doesn't actually move the money, but it sends the payment orders, the instructions that tell banks where to send trillions of dollars every single day. If you get kicked off SWIFT, you're basically cut off from the global economy. For decades, these tools, the dollar, SWIFT, and the big Western central banks, were seen as the neutral plumbing of the world economy. But lately, they've been turned from plumbing into weapons. Economic sanctions have gone from simple trade bans to surgical financial strikes meant to paralyze whole countries. And no case shows this frightening new reality better than the strange and twisted story of Venezuela's gold. The story really kicks off in 2018. Venezuela, under President Nicolás Maduro, was deep in an economic crisis. With hyperinflation out of control, the government was desperate for cash. So they turned to one of their most valuable assets: 31 tons of gold, worth billions, stored in the Bank of England's vaults. The Maduro government made a simple request: send our gold home. The Bank of England said no. The official reason was political. The UK, along with the US, and dozens of other nations, had stopped recognizing Nicolás Maduro as the legitimate president after a disputed 2018 election. Instead, they recognized the opposition leader, Juan Guaido. The UK government used a legal idea called the one voice principle, which says the courts have to follow the government's lead on who runs another country. If the government recognized Guaido, so must the Bank of England. What came next was a messy, years-long legal fight in the British courts. The Maduro government sued the Bank of England, arguing it desperately needed the money to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. Juan Guaido's rival administration also claimed the gold. The courts went back and forth, but in 2021, the UK Supreme Court effectively blocked the gold's return to Maduro's control, siding with the UK's recognition of Guaido. Behind the scenes, the political pressure was intense. Former U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton admitted in his memoir that the UK readily agreed to freeze the gold at Washington's request to help a destabilization campaign against Maduro. The gold was no longer just an asset. It was a pawn in a geopolitical game. For years, the situation was frozen. The gold, valued at nearly $2 billion at the time, sat in London, legally owned by the Venezuelan state, but usable by no one. And then, just a few days ago, in the first week of January 2026, the whole chessboard was flipped over. In a stunning military raid called Operation Absolute Resolve, U.S. forces captured President Nicolás Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores, in Caracas. They were then flown to the United States to face charges of narcoterrorism and drug smuggling. With Maduro gone, you'd think the path was clear for the gold's release, but the reality is far more complicated. While the U.S. carried out the raid, the U.K. government has stated it was not involved in the operation. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said that while they shed no tears about the end of his regime, the UK government is focused on a peaceful transition to a legitimate government. In Parliament, Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper signaled that the UK does not yet officially recognize the new acting leadership in Caracas. This means that the same one-voice principle that locked up the gold in the first place is still in effect. The Bank of England has no new orders, so we're left with an incredible international stalemate. The U.S. took out one leader, but its closest ally isn't on the same page about what comes next, and caught in the middle is billions of dollars of a nation's wealth. The gold isn't being handed over. It remains where it has been for years, in a London vault, a monument to the new, chaotic world of weaponized finance. The sheer complexity here shows just how tangled finance and geopolitics have become. It's a story with huge global implications that we're going to keep unpacking. If you find this kind of analysis valuable for understanding the forces reshaping our world, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps us continue to make in-depth reports like this one. And this brings us to a crucial point. The fight for Venezuela's gold isn't a one-off. It's just the most visible example of a much bigger trend. Once a playbook like this gets written, it's going to be used again. The biggest escalation came in February 2022. After Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the G7 nations did something unprecedented. They froze the foreign reserves of Russia's central bank held in their countries. In an instant, around $300 billion, about half of Russia's war chest, was immobilized. Most of these assets, over $200 billion, are held in Europe, with a huge chunk managed by one financial firm in Belgium called Euroclear. For years, these funds were just frozen. Actually seizing the sovereign assets of another country was seen as a step too far, something that could shatter the entire global financial system. But as the war dragged on and Ukraine's reconstruction costs soared into the trillions, the pressure to do something with that money became intense. In late 2025, the European Union and its G7 partners settled on a novel workaround. They wouldn't seize the principal amount, but they would seize the profits generated by it. As the frozen Russian assets mature, the cash is reinvested, creating billions in windfall profits. The G7 and EU are now using these future profits as collateral to back a massive loan package for Ukraine, providing tens of billions for its defense and economy. It's a clever move that some call financial jiu-jitsu and others call a dangerous precedent. It stops just short of full confiscation, but gets a similar result, using a nation's own wealth against it. This playbook has been used elsewhere too. Iran has been mostly cut off from the SWIFT system for years, a move that has crippled its economy and was designed to force it to negotiate over its nuclear program. For Western powers, the logic is tempting. Why risk soldiers and expensive military gear when you can hit your geopolitical goals with the stroke of a pen from your Treasury Department? Financial sanctions are cheaper, less bloody, and have a thin layer of legal legitimacy. But what happens when the rest of the world sees this and decides they don't want to play by these rules anymore? This weaponization of finance is sparking a powerful backlash, a global reaction that could fundamentally change the world economy. The very tools giving the West its financial power are now pushing other nations to find an escape hatch. The number one result is the accelerating push for de-dollarization. For years, de-dollarization was a niche idea. Today, it's a policy goal for a growing number of powerful countries. When nations see that their dollar reserves can be frozen or seized, the motivation to find an alternative becomes massive. This is where the BRICS bloc, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, plus new members, comes in. They see the current financial system not as a neutral utility, but as a weapon controlled by their rivals. Their answer is to start building a parallel universe, an alternative system that works outside of Western control. The foundation of this effort is China's cross-border interbank payment system, or CIPS. It's now being promoted as a potential swift alternative for the BRICS nations, allowing trade to be settled directly in Chinese yuan, bypassing the dollar and SWIFT completely. They're also developing things like BRICS Pay to link the digital payment systems of member countries, creating a seamless network for trade in the global south. Progress is slow, but it's happening. The goal isn't just economic. It's about achieving financial sovereignty and protecting themselves from what they see as the coercive power of Western sanctions. The world is starting to split into two competing financial spheres, one built around the dollar and SWIFT, and another, still being built, centered on the yuan and CIPS. The story that started with 31 tons of gold in a London vault has brought us to the edge of a new global financial order. Venezuela's gold was the warning shot. It showed that the unwritten rules, like the idea that a central bank's assets are untouchable, could be broken. Freezing Russia's $300 billion in reserves took that precedent and scaled it up to an unimaginable level. The message was sent, and it was heard loud and clear across the globe. If you aren't aligned with the West, your national wealth is not safe. The result is an economic Cold War, where financial choke points are the new battlefields. This new reality comes with huge risks. A fragmented global financial system will likely be less efficient, making trade more expensive and possibly slowing down global growth. It could create a world of competing economic blocs, where political loyalty decides your access to money and markets. The stability of the very system that has lifted billions out of poverty is now in question. It's not clear how this will end. Will the de-dollarization push fizzle out, proving the old order is just too resilient? Or are we watching the birth of a truly multipolar financial world, with different currencies and payment systems all competing for the top spot? One thing is for sure. The weaponization of finance has changed the game for good. That Pandora's box has been opened, and it won't be easily closed. As nations scramble to build new financial walls and forge new alliances, the idea of a truly global, interconnected economy is facing its greatest test yet. What do you think? Is this leading to a more fractured, conflict-prone world? Or could a new multipolar financial order actually create a better balance? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you want to go deeper into the geopolitical shifts shaping our world, check out our video on the future of global energy competition right here. And as always, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what we're covering next.